Welcome back to the Basket Weavers. Last week we finished off with chapter 11 of Ólafur Egilsson's The Travels of Reverend Ólafur Egilsson. And we'll continue today with chapter 12 and go for a bit and probably call it a night at that point. What I saw in that place of evil people is difficult for me to describe because I was so disoriented and grief-stricken at the time. The first thing that we captives met on the streets when we came ashore were the donkeys, heavily laden. These animals are small by our standards. No bigger than a 2-year-old mare, but they are very strong for carrying things. They have ears almost an ell long. An ell, the Hans town ell, used generally in Iceland from the beginning of the 16th century until 1776, was 21 1/11 inches, approximately 53.5 centimeters. I guess that's the standard of measurement he was used to. So just under 2 feet. Their tails were thinner than horses' tails, and their coats are patchy, like thin beards here and there. They walk with a feeding basket in their mouths, tethered by a string band slipped behind their ears, in which is the bread that they eat while walking. This goes on day after day. I saw no carriages used for work in that place. There were many horses with feed baskets filled with bread. These horses were very thin. Most of them pulled the quern to grind meal. In that town, I also saw 5 camels, which were strong and enormous. I could hardly reach up to their backs when they had their saddles on, which are normally kept on them. It is my opinion that each of these animals can carry on as much as 4 or 5 horses. They are all pale or fawn-colored, with a dark stripe down their backs. In some ways, they resemble cattle, especially about their legs and feet, which are cloven. They have a humped back, very long necks, and smallish ears almost like those of a horse. Their heads are very ugly, and they have lips like a bull's. They also carry a feed basket of bread hung from their mouths. These animals are very slow. When they are whipped about their hind legs, they do not react in any way. This is an aside, but I suppose camels would have been quite the novelty to this 17th century Icelander. I saw a dwarf man there and a dwarf woman, because they are so common in that town. He looked to me to be less than 2 ells tall, about 100-something centimeters. She 1.5 ells tall. He had a short trunk and was long-legged with long arms, reaching almost to his knees. He was black as pitch with a big head, but she was astonishingly fat with short fat legs and a long trunk. I also saw birds of many different types and colors and behaviors. I saw a peacock and many other sorts of birds in an aviary. Now about the town itself, even though I do not much like to talk about it, I want to explain that it is white as chalk from limestone that is boiled in big iron kettles, under each of which fire burns in 4 places. The town is built up to a mountain. It is very narrow at the upper end, at the top of the mountain, and very long and wide at the sea. Sort of like a parallelogram. I believe this to be at least 1 thing a man a lathe wide, which is a parliament man's way. It's a traditional Icelandic unit of distance equal to approximately 23.5 miles or 37.5 kilometers. It represented the distance of a thingman, a representative of the thing, the Icelandic parliament. The distance he could travel in 1 day on horseback. Reverend Ólafur, or perhaps the copyist, is obviously mistaken here. The Algiers harbor front was certainly not 23.5 miles across. Perhaps in stress he was seeing things or interpreting things wrong in the past, as we do. The town itself is without a wall as far as I saw, except that one part which is along the seashore. So I guess it had a coastal defense system of some sort. Man, this music's getting really loud in my ear. Each house is open at the top, and there are small, narrow rooms where people sleep. The windows have nothing other than iron grating in them. Because of the great heat which is there from the sun, men and women go almost without clothes. Because the sun is always high in the sky, the land grows 2 crops during the year. And all the fruits of the earth, corn, grapes, grain, groats, grow like this. The grass is never cut, and sheep and cattle are never put into houses because there is no winter there. Never any frost or snow at any time the whole year round. The sheep, which are both big and very fat, lamb 2 times a year. There are no barren or gelded sheep. In one day, Jesper and I saw 100 rams, with tails hanging nearly down to the ground. Many there, who look fair and embellish themselves in order to better carry through their evil business, as David says, whatever happens, we are the Lord's. And some details here. The observation by him here directly contradicts the accounts of other captives from this period, who all agree that Algiers was a walled city. Perhaps the explanation is that Reverend Ólafur was there for only about a month, August 16th/17th to September 20th, and only saw the inner part of the city and the harbor front. Once perhaps he was so... I gotta fix this. I think the music's coming in really loud on my end, and not yours. That's a little better. I don't want to be blasting eardrums out, you know? There we go. That's probably better. I have to actually crank it. Or perhaps, and it also says here, as he puts it himself, he was so disoriented and grief-stricken at the time, the loss of his family and everyone he loves, that his observations just aren't accurate. His description of the city is certainly piecemeal, and seems to reflect the observations of a bewildered man catching momentary glimpses of things as he moved about. For a detailed description of the Algiers city wall, drawn from the contemporary 17th century, see the... Well, there's a section in this book that has pictures and stuff, which are kind of interesting. I recommend getting the book. It says here also that 17th century Icelanders slaughtered much of their livestock, cows and sheep, in the fall. Those they did not slaughter they housed in special buildings, often connected to their own homes during the winter. It was the best way to ensure the animals survived until spring came. That's because it gets friggin' cold there. Though I've been there myself, and it's not that bad. It's pretty temperate. All things being equal. Chapter 13. Moving along. About the dress of the people, and how their plates and drinking cups were in that place. Awkward titles. As for people's clothes, as I have said earlier, those who came in this land as Christians kept to their own manner of dress. The Turks say that in that place there are 9,000 Christian people who have been there for a long time. One presumes that, and this is a note, one presumes that Reverend Ólafur is referring here to the population of European renegados in Algiers. He might be referring to slaves, though, or both. It's not clear. Poor guy. Continuing. The Turkish women, firstly, wear good dresses with many folds and pleats around the waist. These dresses are made of silk, of the finest of which I think exists in the world. They are not open except in the neck. Also, women wear linen trousers down to their shoes, attaching one end of the cuffs to their instep and the other to their heels. They wear skull caps made of linen, which are neat and handily made, and a mantle which is made either of circular woven linen or other valuable weaving. When they go outside, they wrap the lap of the mantle around their face so that when they walk on the streets, nobody knows them. But indoors, they wear good plain clothes without folds, though they wear linen trousers. The Christian women are dressed in a similar way, except that they do not wear the pants. Based. In that place, dishware is all made of either clay or copper. Dishes and wash basins are of tinned copper, but the drinking cups are all made of clay and have clay necks. Everyone has the same sort of drinking cups, both the Turks and the prisoners. In that place, they drink only warm, brackish water, which in many places is brought into the houses. Most people in that place sleep on the floor without a mattress, but place thick blankets beneath and on top of them. Though I had no experience of these, there were no storage chests to be seen and no barrels where I was, and no tables or benches. They do not use knives when eating, and as far as I could see, there were no spoons except those made of wood. There was no iron on the doors except for hinges. Most houses had swinging doors. When food is eaten, people sit straight-legged on the floor. During the time that we 3 Icelanders were in that house, Jesper Christensen, I felt unwell. But John Thorstensen became truly sick. Then my honest wife was allowed to visit me, but not to stay there very long. Ah, Lord, our transgressions deserve punishment, but you help us for our name's sake. During that time, I was barefoot and had no clothes. Then God awakened one French man who had been there for a long time. That man gave me new shoes and also a liter of aquaviva brandy. At the time I was ill, he gave me some homespun woolen cloth 3 ells in length. And that same man told me that many Icelandic people were lying sick and dying all around the town, which did not make me happy. Oof. He also told me that in the Christian cemetery, there was already 31 buried. The Icelanders could not endure the terrible heat of that place. That same Frenchman also told me that a girl who had been my servant, who was very good looking, had been sold. First for $700, dalers, I guess. But then a rich man came from Jerusalem, 38 miles to the northeast, and paid 1,000 dalers for her, and took her back with him to Jerusalem, where he gave her to a Christian man. There's a note here. Reverend Ólafur seems to have little idea of the geography involved here, since Jerusalem is vastly more than 38 miles from Algiers, regardless of that distance of one of his miles might actually represent. One manuscript version of the travels puts his distance at 300 miles, but even this is far from accurate. The actual distance is about 2,500 miles, or 4,000 kilometers, and that the direction is almost due east, not northeast. It is possible that Reverend Ólafur had a clearer sense of the distance than it appears, and that perhaps the copyist who later reproduced his original manuscript mistook the measurement. Okay, so it's just a mess. They just messed it up. In that place, Christian men cannot have intercourse with Turkish women, nor Turkish men with Christian women, otherwise they lose their lives. About such things I do not need to write further, except to say that I witnessed these things, and that they are the truth as I see them. And since we are all bound to pray for each other, then do not forget, good Christian people, to pray for our captured kinsmen, so that God will bless them and maintain them in their Christian belief, young as well as old, until their deaths, because it is God's good will that we surrender ourselves to His mercy, which has no end, but it is renewed every morning. Lamentations 2:22-23. So, that's chapter 13. And here's chapter 14, about how I was driven from Algiers and how things went on my miserable travels. Is this a long one? No, he keeps these pretty short, which is handy for this sort of content. On the 20th day of September, I was called from my house where I was imprisoned and taken to the house where I was imprisoned and taken to the house where my wife and babies were. And he makes a note here. In this chapter, Ólafur is leaving for Denmark to try to raise money from the Danish monarchy to ransom his wife and children, and presumably the others. I begged with all humbleness and prayer of the captors who came to fetch me that I might be allowed to greet my wife and children, all of whom were already very sick. I was hardly allowed 10 words with them, however, and then my captors callously pulled me away. Oh, distress on distress. To lose both babies and wife makes one despair, but the returns into eternal life all separations repair. What a poet. Now in the name of Jesus and the Lord... Now in the name of Jesus the Lord says, I am the one who made these and formed these from the womb, and I will pour my spirit upon thy seed and blessings on thine offspring. Be not afraid. Isaiah 44, 2-3. After this painful meeting with my family, I was taken to the street where the official who was to issue me safe conduct lived. This safe conduct, written in many languages, I was to give to any Turkish pirates who might capture a ship on which I was passenger. The document explained that I should neither be killed nor interfered with because I was acting as a messenger. I still have this document and have shown it to several people, including the Archbishop of Copenhagen. It says here, technically speaking, there was no Archbishop of Copenhagen after the Reformation. It is likely that this is a copyist error, and Reverend Ólafur meant the Sjælland Biskup, the Bishop of Sjælland, i.e. Zealand, on the island of which Copenhagen is located. The Sjællandske Biskup was the leader of the Danish church, and so of also the Icelandic church. If it was this man, he was Hans Poulsen Resen, who was a bishop from 1615 until his death in 1638. This is almost certainly the Dr. Hans Resen from whom Reverend Ólafur dined in Copenhagen. With whom Reverend Ólafur dined in Copenhagen. That'll come up in chapter 24. So after this painful meeting with my family, I was taken to the street where the official... Oh wait, no, sorry, I already read that part. In order to receive this safe conduct, I had to kiss the pirate's hands again. That same day, I was put on board an Italian ship. On this voyage, I suffered great hardship and distress, and at one point, for lack of proper food and water, I was reduced to drinking water that a lion, bear, and ostrich, and some monkeys and poultry had drunk from and befouled. Gross. That's sort of like Backwash City. Even so, I was glad because I was so thirsty. That sucks. After we had been at sea for some time, we saw a Turkish ship which followed us for 2 days but did not catch us. The, quote, friendship between the Italians and the Turks is such that when they have completed trading with one another and are 1 mile out from the harbor, they will set upon and kill each other remorselessly. How nice. A week into the voyage, the sailing master lost his way, though he was a man who never helped very much. In my judgment. Oh, let's see made a note here. Exciting notes. The Icelandic word here is stýrimaður, which means steersman, which we have rendered as sailing master. Reverend Ólafur is likely referring to the ship's pilot, that is, the man responsible for guiding the ship. In the 17th century, nautical charts were both less available and less accurate than today, and sailing vessels relied on such pilots, who made use of personal knowledge of the area to act as navigators. The pilot appears to have gotten lost, hence Reverend Ólafur's low opinion of his abilities. I guess, it's a real human voyage. Mistakes were made. Then we saw land on the port side, and because the sea was very calm, we dropped anchor, put a boat over the side, and rowed towards the shore. I went with those going ashore because I did not dare to remain on the ship when my companion went to the land, because there were many sorts of foreign people aboard. There were 7 Italians, 4 Jews, who sometimes gave us crumbs of bread, and also 4 English, 3 Spanish, and 5 French. Of the French, I was particularly afraid because they constantly cast sour looks towards me, and the 5 Germans, including my companion. When we drew near the shore, we found that we could not come to the land, except in a kind of skerry formed by rocks, which had fallen from the steep cliff that formed the shoreline. As we drew near land, some people appeared on the skerry and threatened us. We assured them that all we wanted was to have some water, only 4 small hogsheads of it, but they refused to listen. The boat's crew asked that the name of this country, and the people said it was called Sardinia. Interesting. As we lay to there along the stones of the Scary, unable to land because of the people preventing us, a gale sprang up. We could not move, and we were stranded there for 2 days and a night with neither food nor drink. The boat's crew was very afraid about the ship because the weather had turned against us. But when the weather fell calm once more, we rowed straight out to the ship, which lay at anchor unharmed. Once aboard again, we had a good meal, but there was still little to drink. A few days thereafter, we came to the island which was named Malta, where St. Paul stayed a while. So what a random... would that be Sicily then? That's really off course to go to Malta afterwards. Maybe there's a note. Where St. Paul stayed for a while. Several days later, we drew near Italy, where the ship's captain lived, and made harbor at a place called Ligor, or Livorno. Let's see here. A sailing route from Algiers to Livorno that goes via Sardinia and then the island of Malta seems excessively roundabout. No, I guess I was right. There are far more straightforward, quicker routes. Given Ólafur's lack of geographic knowledge of this part of the world, it is likely that he got this wrong, and whatever island he may have sailed past was not Malta. On the other hand, prevailing winds and currents may have dictated the course, and Reverend Ólafur claims the ship's pilot, the sailing master, lost his way. Rather than try to second-guess him, in Map 3, we've plotted the course he outlines and extended it from Malta north through the strait through Sicily and toe of Italy, and so Livorno, an unlikely route, admittedly, but one that least fits with the narrative. So, it might be bullshit. There, everybody had to wait on the ship for 6 days. No one could set foot on land until he had been examined by the master surgeon in charge. Oh, that's interesting. The Livorno authorities were likely worried about the bubonic plague, the Black Death. Intermittent eruptions of the plague ravaged Algiers throughout the 17th century. One particularly devastating outbreak in 1620 to 1621 is estimated to have killed upward of 50,000 people. This event would surely have been in the minds of the Livorno port authorities. Such fears of infection were well founded. Northern and central Italy suffered a major plague epidemic, only a few years after this, 1629 and 1631, in which nearly 300,000 people died. Fair enough. Real plague, you know what I'm saying? The crew's wives who lived there could see their husbands and talk with them, but could not come close to them. One of the Italians gave me wine to drink and apples and cheese to eat, and this would have made me hope for better things to come, except that it did not last. I can say, as Job said, God's Spirit has made me part of life. I am truly the Lord's. Job 33:4. Chapter 15. About what went on in that place, Livorno, good and bad, and my journey to Germany. On the 11th of October, we people aboard the ship were called to the land. Each and every man was brought into a longhouse some distance from town, which had been built to provide a place to inspect people and to see whether they were pestilence-free. That is, not infected with the plague, and to determine if they had any other serious diseases. When we arrived there, the master surgeon of this place came and ordered us to take our clothes off. When we had done this, he examined everyone under the arms and also the groin, women as well as men. When this was over, then the people could enter the town. I went to the others, but with great grief and sorrow, for I could not expect I could expect no help in this place except from God. When I came into the town, to my good fortune, the English who had come with me from the Barbary invited me to their table and paid for my food and drink, which was 7 coins, and arranged for me a room in the house belonging to a Norwegian man who had lived in the town. That same man gave me food the day after, which was the 11th of October. The day after that, the 13th of October, I did not get anything to eat, wet or dry, as people used to say, but I was allowed to stay in their house. But then my hardship was such that, in the name of God, I begged help of some of the merchants in the town, who were German and also English. They gave me 5 dailers, or almost 6, all in silver or gold, in small coins. I did not know this currency, and so had to write things down. We received mercy from our fellow men through God's working. The Norwegian man gave me ink and paper and helped me in many things. He boarded me free of charge, although I at last paid some back. With the money I had got, I wanted to travel with my travel partner, the German from Hamburg. His name was Jacob Swarj. Swari. Says here, Ólafur gives us few details about Jacob. He did not escape from Algiers, for no escaped slave could leave the city on board a ship like a normal passenger. So he's either ransomed or, less likely, sent on a quest for ransom money, like Reverend Ólafur. The fact that Ólafur understood and spoke some German and could continue with Swari may explain in part why he chose the man as a traveling companion. He got his back though. This man, whom the Turks had captured in the springtime before mid-May, had both wife and children in Hamburg. He had got no money at all in the town and therefore totally helpless. I offered to share with him, for I did not know the currency nor the road I must take. We traveled for 4 days and passed by that big place called Venediborg, Venice. This town is enormous, and the larger part of the town is on the sea rather than the land. When we walked past the town, the city had a triple wall which was immensely tall to see. Big note here. I'll finish this first though. It is said to be 14 miles in circumference, which is 4.5 thing monolith. The sea, which there reaches into the land, is called the Venedibotnar. Excuse that pronunciation. I guess it means Venice Bay. So here, Note 3. It seems that Ólafur misunderstood or perhaps was misled by the local people with whom he interacted, and he mistook Milan for Venice. 17th century Venice had no fortifications corresponding to this description of a triple wall which was immensely tall to see. Milan, however, did have such a wall. The Milan city walls consisted of 3 separate projects, the first built in Roman times, the second during the Middle Ages, and the third, Mura Spagnoli, or Spanish walls, during the middle of the 16th century by the Spanish Habsburg rulers of the city. The Spanish walls formed a massive rampart 15 feet or more in height, studded with bastions and a dozen or so large porti, gateways, stretching for about 7 miles, 11 kilometers around the city. In the 1620s, it would have been not much more than half a century old and still in quite solid shape. It would no doubt have looked extremely impressive to a rural Icelander. The Spanish wall was also encircled by a moat, which Reverend Ólafur could conceivably have mistaken for an arm of the sea which there reaches into the land. It should be remembered that Ólafur only had a limited ability to converse with those around him. He may have understood and spoken some German, but there's no indication he understood any Italian. He had never before traveled outside Iceland before, except possibly to Denmark, and he had no real geographical knowledge of Europe. His confusing Milan with Venice is therefore quite plausible. I guess he's just kind of stuck there, eh? A man out of his element. Yeah, continue. We passed the mountain which was named Baldach, where it is said that in the old story, Thorbjorg the Stout lived. And this is the Jarlmanna saga, which features a giantess named Thorborg, who lives in Baldach Mountain in Sirkland, the Norse name for the Abbasid Caliphate centered in Baghdad. Any mountain Reverend Ólafur saw would not, of course, have been located in what was now modern-day Iraq. It seems likely that what he saw was Mount Baldo, a mountain range in the Italian Alps, reaching a maximum height about 7,200 feet, located just east of Lago de Gardi, Lake Garda, and that he conflated the two names, Baldach and Baldo. Since Roman times, one of the principal routes connecting northern Italy and what is now Austria-Germany has been the Passo de Brennero, the Brenner Pass, which cuts through the Alps across the modern border between Italy and Austria. The main road leading northward out of Italy toward the Passo del Brennero runs just east of Monte Baldo. The country through which Ólafur traveled would have been part of the Venetian Republic, which at that time contained vastly more territory than just the city itself, incorporating a broad swath of country extending into the Adriatic coast, northward to Lago de Gardi. 200 kilometers, including such cities and towns as Padua, Vicenza, Verona, and Bergamo. The border with the Holy Roman Empire lay not far north of Monte Baldo. It makes sense that Ólafur and his companion, traveling on foot, as they were, would take this route to the Passo del Brennero in their attempts to reach Germany, and that Reverend Ólafur would thus see Mount Baldo along the way. It also makes sense that, traveling through what everyone knew was the lands of the Venetian Republic, Ólafur could mistake Milan for Venice, as we believe he did. There's no indication that Reverend Ólafur understood Italian, so he would probably have been screwed with a lot of the Italian jokers. Okay. Anyways, I continue. And then we came to a very short distance into High Germany, a one-day walk. Okay. The term High Germany, Hochdeutschland, that Reverend Ólafur uses is not much employed as a geographical designation today, but was common in his time. It referred to the southern mountainous part of modern Austria, Germany. It is difficult to determine exactly how far into High Germany the two travelers managed to go. I continue. We stopped and passed the night in the home of an old widow, who asked us where we had come from and where we wanted to go. When she heard our answers, she begged us for God's sake to go back because all the travelers on that road ahead were being killed by soldiers of the Kaiser. Okay. So it says there the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, had been raging for nearly a decade, devastating the area that Ólafur and his companion were about to enter. One presumes Kaiser refers to Ferdinand II, Habsburg monarch and Holy Roman Emperor, from 1619 to 1637. When he heard this, my traveling companion was very shocked. We returned that same night down the road we had traveled and walked for 2 days and 2 nights until we returned to Livorno. I think it was the 22nd of October. In that town, we went to some monks and asked them for help, but they said that Luther should help us. Oof. Because they're Catholic monks. They apparently had scant charity for destitute Protestants. There I had to leave my traveling companion, that good man of Hamburg. He was forced to become a sailor since he had no money. Womp womp. See, Lord, you are righteous, and your word is righteous. Alright, chapter 16. About that place, Livorno, its churches and the habits of the monks, their dress, and their way of performing divine service. The town of Livorno is not very big, and we could walk around it in 2 hours, but I think it's impregnably defended. It has 2 very strong brick walls and a deep moat by the outside wall, upon which ships may sail or row around the town. Well, that's kind of handy. The buildings in the town are 3 stories high and very well built. In many places, the houses are masterfully painted. In that town are 23 churches, 2 of them very huge, built of gray marble and decorated with gold and silver around the whole of the ceiling and the walls down to the floor. Also, the pulpit, the altar, and the seat where the monk is sitting when he takes confession are decorated thusly. When I was there, I witnessed the act of confession. The one who is going to confess takes a chair, which is separated from a monk's seat by a wide, square brass screen with strands between them. They talk to each other through this screen, which is 2 L's in each direction, I guess about 100 and some odd centimeters, and is pricked with many small holes like a sieve. If the one who is confessing gives the monk some money, the monk releases him from his sins, which he's going to commit. I think you might be interpreting that wrong. Alongside of each door of the church stand 2 pillars of black marble, not more than 2 L's high, and upon these stand 2 basins, which with consecrated water, they say. Each person who walks into the church must dip 2 fingers into these basins and make the sign of the cross to his forehead with the water, which still wets their fingers. 2 monks are set to the task of observing that this is done. Also, I saw in the town a visit made to sick people. It happened in the way I want to describe. Not because there is anything to learn from it, but because of the apish manners of those who participated. It is humorous. I witnessed this from the doors of the house of a Norwegian man whose name was Ólafur Sæmundsson, who told me what it meant. As far as I know, it happened this way. Many people, women and men, walk along, and each holds a candle. In the middle of this crowd walks the monk, under a canopy of blue silk, supported on 4 poles. When this procession enters the house of a sick person, the monk is given a space to walk in. The whole crowd throws the light from the candles after him, and then each walks back to his house. There's a note here. It is not entirely clear what the phrase, throw the light from the candles after him, actually means. The original Icelandic text is confused, and this is the best sense we can make of it. Okay. Anyways, the monk had a bag hung around his neck and a small chorus bell which rings. In that town, the bells never rest. If you, good man, want to know the truth about how the monks look, then I must tell you that they wear 3 different colors of clothes depending on their religious order. Some are gray friars, some are black friars, and some are white friars. Their clothes are such that gray friars wear long robes which reach to their ankles. These robes are made gray because the yarn of the warp is white. Does he mean wrap? But that of the woof is black. They do not wear anything except a shirt, no trousers. About their necks they have a very short mantle, which is like a long hood, so voluminous that their heads can be rattled around in there. Okay. Some of the monks wear wooden shoes, and they hold their robes together by a wooden clasp and cord. Around them they have a belt made of thin rope, with many knots, one end of which falls on the hem of their robes. On this rope belt they fasten their book, which has a cover, as the law books did in olden times here in Iceland. The book is at their left side, but their rosary beads are on the right side. In front they have a long tobacco pipe. They all look this way, gray, black, and white. They have their beards cut every 14 days and their heads shaved except for a ring around their heads. Even though they wash themselves with lye and strong soap, it would only serve to reveal their faithlessness and dishonesty all the more clearly. How do you then dare to say, am I not impure? Jeremiah 2:22-23. I suppose that's there's some Catholic Protestant resentment here. Anyways, we're on to chapter 17. About their dress in that town, Livorno, and the unusual things I saw there. Did you reuse the chapter title? Hold on here, just to double check that. That's slightly different. The men of Livorno are extremely well dressed. Better, I think, than anywhere else in the world. Even though he hasn't really seen much. Or here in the Nordic countries. They wear silk and velvet, and they wear nothing except only shirts and jerkins, which are cut in 5 strings on the shoulders, and also the same way on the arms. Their trousers are also the same. They spend so much on themselves that their legging strings, garters, cost 60 dalers. Their shoelaces 10 dalers, and other things are similarly expensive. And the men who fancify themselves like this include even soldiers and porters. In that town, food is so very expensive that people who want to buy food for the week have to pay 4 dalers, even for poor meals. 1 pound of birds, very small birds, costs 16 shillings. Ólafur has Danish skillingar in mind here rather than English shillings. I guess there's a section for talking about the differences in currencies, but I'm not going to go into that here. About the dress on holy days, I cannot say much. I guess he wasn't there for that. As for how the women dress, their clothing is costly and made of valuable cloth, and cut very well and very well made. The style resembles that of the lower parts of honest women's dresses here in Iceland. Honest women. Do you mean like married women? Their bodies have gold and silver buttons, and even buttons of precious stones, and their shoes cost 60 dalers, some even more. Things haven't changed. The vamps of their shoes are made from velvet. which are and are divided into 3 on the instep with gold buttons. All the people in that town are dark-haired but white-skinned, with good-looking faces and figures. I want to put down here something that I saw which I had never seen before. Every morning that I was there, I saw in all the streets of the town 100 people or more going about in chains, shackled 2 by 2 together as horses are harnessed. These people are totally naked except for a small piece of clothing around the waist to cover their shame, in quotes. 2 other men went with them, whom I understood to be their overseers. With that group was a deer from whom the antlers were cut, and also 2 big rams and a fox and a sea cat, a kind of monkey. Both of whom were in a red dress. I think it's funny how they call monkeys sea cats. These 2 walked only on their hind legs, and wore black shoes and hats on their heads, and had blades at their sides. If I may say so, from behind their red trousers hung their long tails. What this act was, I hardly know. So, there's a note here. We hardly know either. The crowd of shackled, almost naked people might possibly have been a parade of slaves redeemed from North Africa. Such theatrical displays of redeemed captives, offering a dramatic proof that the various redemptionist orders had succeeded in their ransom work, were not uncommon at this time. The role of the animals that he describes, however, is perplexing. Yeah, I'd say so. Anyways, I'll continue. I also saw there were 2 other animals, which were called buffalo, or buffler. These resemble the biggest ox in general shape, and they look amazingly fat. They have screwed horns like old rams. The Norwegian man told me that they had no fat on them, inside or out, and they were very strong to drag wagons filled with brick, iron, salt, and lead. It says here, the Norwegian man is presumably Ólafur Simonsen, the Norwegian man mentioned in previous chapters. Further, I saw in that town a masterpiece, the like of which I have never seen before or since. It was 14 human figures in fetters, cast in copper, i.e. bronze, about a column of white marble. This column was a 4-square and a figure set by each side, looking almost like living men. These were replicas of a Turk and his 3 sons, who had done great damage to Christianity. In stature, they were like giants, but the Duke of that town had conquered them in battle and had their figures cast in memory of his victory. His figure stands over them with a big sword in hand. It says here, the statue, known in Italian as Il Monumento dei 4 Mori, the Monument of the 4 Moors, contains 2 sections. The upper part was created by Giovanni Bandini and erected in 1617. It depicts Ferdinando the First, aka Ferdinando de' Medici, 1549 to 1609, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. The 4 Turks in the lower part were created by Pietro Tacca in 1623 to 26. Reverend Ólafur is quite likely the first person to mention the Quattro Mori in a book. The statue can still be seen in Livorno today. I continue. There on pikes on a wall are placed the severed heads of Turkish pirates. Scripture says here that bad fortune overcome the godless. Bad fortune will overcome the godless. And there's a note. When Reverend Ólafur visited it, Livorno was a thriving and prosperous port with a population of around 10,000. Its prosperity derived from more than simple trade, though. The city had its own corsairs, the Order of the Knights of St. Stephen, created in the 1560s, who attacked Muslim vessels in the Mediterranean, returning with booty and captives to be enslaved or ransomed. At the same time, merchants who bought merchandise seized from captured European ships in Tripoli, Tunis, and Algiers could resell it profitably in the Livorno marketplace. It is no coincidence that Ólafur was put aboard a Livorno-bound ship when he left Algiers. Despite its realpolitik trading relations with North Africa, the city had a reputation for being implacably hostile towards Barbary corsairs, hence the pikes on the wall. There is a picture of the statue of 4 Barbary corsairs as captives. But unfortunately you can't see it. It's kind of crap though, to be honest. They didn't do a good job of putting it in this book. Alright. Chapter 18. I'm just gonna look. Maybe I'll go to chapter 20. I'm just gonna do chapter 20. I'll go to chapter 20 and then I'll call it, you know, a nice even 20. Chapter 18. About my travels to Genoa and from there to Marseille. From Livorno in Italy, I bought passage on a small boat, which they call a barque, to the great and powerful town Genoa, by the border of the French kingdom. I was 2 days on that voyage. Genoa is an enormously great city with very strongly built walls. It is by the sea with huge castles on both sides, with cannons so large one could almost crawl into their mouths. I was told that the city is 18 great miles around. Okay, so a great mile is likely some version of the German Grosse Meile, which is equal to approximately 5 to 6 statute miles, 8 to 9.5 kilometers. Looks like he might have overestimated how big this was, because there's no way the town's 90 miles around. Where it meets the sea, it is 12 stories high and triple walled. Okay, here we go again. Genoa, it's a note here. Genoa, like Milan and many other Italian cities, have protective walls. As the city expanded over centuries, the walls were improved and enlarged. The first extensive set of walls was built in the 9th century. A second larger was added in the 12th. These were expanded in the 14th and then enlarged and fortified in the 16th centuries. A new spate of wall construction was just underway when Ólafur visited the city. The Genoese doge of the time, Giacomo Lomellini, having officiated at a ceremony in December 1626 in which he had laid the first stone of the new walls. Reverend Ólafur's description of the city being triple-walled is not literally accurate, at least not in the sense there was 3 clearly demarcated concentric walls. Multi-walled might have been a more appropriate description. Genoa stands under the mountains which are named Alpsfjall, which is the Alps in Icelandic. In that place, a Danish woman accommodated me for 2 nights and helped me in other things. From each place one travels, then one must buy a letter to another, which is testimony that he is not sick or infected, sick or infected person. From the letter for that letter of testimony, one has to pay 4 copper coins, or stifur, which is as much as 3 fish here in Iceland for us. Okay, 3 fish. So, note here, in Iceland at this period, fish was treated as a unit of currency in business and trade. I suppose so. On the way to Genoa, I saw the glow of Rome in the distance. Okay, that's not probably right. Although I did not see the city itself during the night, I saw hills of the city and the glowing lights of it, which seemed to mount higher in the sky than the constellation of Pisces, which is seen in mid-sky here. From that route, only 4 stars are to be seen. This, they told me, was Rome. So obviously the Italians were messing with them. It says, clearly Reverend Ólafur was mistaken or misled, as he seemingly suspects himself. It is a geographical impossibility to see the lights of Rome along the route he was taking. Those Italians, eh? I came to Genoa on the 28th of October. There were not many things of interest there that I had not already seen earlier, except for 3 reindeer, a tamed bear which did not walk except on its hind legs and kept its front legs behind its back. There I saw a stained glass window at least 5 or 6 fathoms high, and there too I saw for the first time windmills, at which I stared. I also saw a brick house which was unusually constructed. It was glossy on the outside, and in it wine was kept. This house seemed to me to be 4 fathoms large on each side. I did not know how it was equipped within, but there was an iron ladder outside which was fastened to a brick column. From Genoa, I bought, again, passage on a ship on All Saints' Day, morning November 1st, to Marseille in France, with help from the Danish woman. What a charity case. On the 6th day of that month, I came to the town called Blikmar in France. Every night during that voyage, we went close ashore. The captain and crew of my ship did not dare do anything else because of the Barbary pirates. On the 7th day of the month, I came to Marseille and gave the master of the town my passport from the Turkish pirates. That day, I did not get any place to stay in the town till evening, though I tearfully begged in over 20 places. At sunset, a woman came to me where I sat mournfully. She talked to me in correct Icelandic and asked, "What manner of man are you?" I answered her, "A poor, miserable Icelander." "Are you an Icelander?" she said. "Then come with me. I will give you a room for tonight. I am also an Icelander, a woman also exiled." But when I came to her house, there were both a German man and some English there, who understood my words. One of the Englishmen, who was a spectacle maker, recognized me. This man said I was a priest from Iceland. Then the woman immediately ordered me out of the house. When she seized me, I tried to throw me out. My good God awaked the German merchant. He became concerned at once and got straight up from the drinking table because I was at a drinking house. It was a drinking house, and he promised to pay for my food and drink and to house me as long as I was in the town. In the bitterness and adversity of life, we are guided by God to relief. Oh, I don't know why that Icelandic woman hated him so much. He said he was Icelandic. Chapter 19, about what happened to me in Marseille and what prevented me from traveling to Paris. That evening I got enough to eat and drink, and also a good bed to rest in, none of which I had got since I had first been captured 16 weeks and 1 day before. Aboard ship I had to lie down on ropes, and I had not even a proper chance to take my clothes off, neither night nor day. When I came into this house, I had only 4 pieces of bread and a small sack of cloth. I had brought 18 from Italy, and had 4 thalers left of my money, which I kept well. The next morning, very early, the merchant whom I had already mentioned came and confirmed the promise he had made to aid me. He declared before everybody that, although he did not know what caused him to feel so, he loved me as his own father. I stayed in that house, at his expense, during the 8th, 9th, and until early on the 10th of that month, which was a Saturday. On that day, 5 Dutch sea captains came into the drinking house, sat down, and began drinking good wine. Around that time, food was brought to me where I sat at a small table. While I was eating, the most important of the captains asked me who I was, where I came from, and where I was going. When I told him my story, he was so moved that he stood up from his table, walked over to me where I sat in my poverty, took me in his arms, and promised to give me food and drink on his ship as long as he made his trade there. He also promised that he would bring me with him to Holland, and also that he could take me to see me to Denmark. This honest fellow's name was Caritas Hardspanner. When he walked out of that house, he called me to come with him, and I went with him straight to his ship. I was there with him for 6 weeks and 2 days while his ship was in the harbor, and went with him almost daily into that town. At that time, I wanted to travel to Paris, that capital of the Kingdom of France, which is the royal residence, 12 miles from Marseille, straight north. This is obviously untrue. Reverend Ólafur seems to have no clear grasp of geography involved here. The overland distance between Marseille and Paris is about 500 miles. Whether he intends here the same mile he employed when assessing the circumference of Milan, 1 such mile equaled 7.5 statute miles, or great miles, or 1 great mile equaled 5 to 6 statute miles, or some other version, he's still way off. I guess he's just, can you imagine, I'm just gonna walk to Paris, it's only 12 miles away, and walk there in a day, and it's friggin' 800 kilometers. Several things, however, prevented me from doing this. 1, it was 800 kilometers. No, I'm just kidding, I added that. 1, I was very weak and did not trust myself to be able to make the walk. 2, I was very poor and it always cost something to travel in these countries. 3, I had no proper clothes to wear, and I was ashamed to be amongst people because of my wretchedness of my appearance and the sorrow which I had and still have today. I had heard rumors of murder being committed on the road, and was too faint-hearted because of my misery to chance the trip. When I am poor, I am rich, for I fear God and avoid sin. Final chapter, chapter 20. About some of the handiwork and practices which I saw there for providing food for the people. In that town, Marseille, I did not see many things that I had not seen before in other places, and I have already written about, except for some handiwork and other methods of providing food from the sea. There I saw 2 great ships being built. Firstly, the keel is laid. Next, the ribs are placed on the ship, in the shape of which the ship will take. Then the ribs are lined. Then lastly, the planks forming the hull are put on. I also paid a visit to a smithy, where big anchors are made. In this place, the wind hammers the iron. The sledgehammers come from the air, and some come from a conical wheel, above which stand 2 mills. Of that apparatus, I did not have any understanding at all. It says here, he seems to be describing a kind of windmill-powered trip hammer, a device to mechanically drive the sledgehammers that beat the hot iron. A technology entirely beyond anything he had seen before. The anchors are moved into the furnace by wheels. In another smithy, I saw iron cutters, large and small. I also visited the place where copper, bronze, cannons are cast. The building of that smithy stood quite tall. I think that their molds were located under the forge's heart. But about that I cannot talk without any true knowledge. Now about their manner of food supply. First, the fishermen go out day after day with extremely long nets, but get little profit of it in my opinion. Some get a few small trout no bigger than minnows. Some get nothing except what we call in Iceland gulkar, sea urchins, and only 1 small basket of such. And this is the maintenance of all their lives, for both them and their wives and children. In that town, fresh food is very expensive. There is good and plentiful drink there, consisting of French wine, which is not served except equally with water, because otherwise you'd be dehydrated. Also, there are fishermen who, with their wives and children, live from what they catch in the rounded pool, harbor, that the town surrounds, which I will talk about later. They go out in a small boat. The wife rows while the husband stands on the bow with a long pole in his hands. At the end of that pole is a rather big dip net of woven cord. Inside the wooden frame of the net are a set of 5 or 6 teeth of iron. With these teeth, he scratches down on the sea bottom, and when he has got a dip net full of dirt, then the wife lets go the oars and helps him to draw the dip net up the gunwale so that he can rinse the dirt from it. After this, there remains in the drip net 1 dab, a small flat fish, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes none. Also, there are fishing methods such that every morning, 2 men go out in a boat with nets supported by 4 big curved brackets tied together on the end of a long pole which is raised up in the bow of the boat. There is a large stone at the lower end of the pole to hold it in place. When these fishermen come to the other ships which have nets thrown out, they put their own net down, and they get a few trout, sometimes 6, 7, or 8. In this way, they maintain themselves and their families. So it notes here, compared to the fishing in Icelandic waters, these catches in France would have seemed extremely paltry. My brothers, there is poverty in more places than in Iceland. There are many people who become panicked over nothing and, in their blind haste, hinder their own arrival on shore. On the other hand, there are those who stay calm through, though they may be in great need and very weak and miserable. Upon these people God looks with mercy and helps them in their distress, as he has done for me. Well, that's, I guess I better mark that. Chapter 20. That's all done. So, that's about it for tonight. I think there's, let's see how many chapters are left. Manuscript sources. There's a lot of appendices. Letters from people attesting to the veracity of this that came later in the years. This one chapter's friggin' long. Some poems. I guess we're almost done. I think maybe there's only 25 chapters. I'll finish it off next time anyways. Oh, here we are. Let's see. It's a very tight book. I keep good care of it. Okay, there's 27 chapters, so we'll finish this next time. It's not a long book. It's basically just made out of notes from his mind he made after being captured. But, you know, thanks for watching. If you watched this, it's long, and I really want to finish the book and get it out there. I think it's kind of worthwhile because it's hard to find. I think for that book I bought, I think it was $50 on Amazon, which is quite expensive, but I wanted to have it. I was looking for it for a while. Maybe I'll do a proper one at some point where I'll just upload the entire audiobook, and hopefully I'll be better at speaking at that time. Alright, well, thanks for listening. Have a good Sunday. Have a good week. May God have mercy on your eternal soul.